Hello, we're Steve and Janet Ray, and we're very proud to be presenters on this wonderful weekend of this marriage conference. And we want to entitle our talk, Looking Back Over the Years, How We Made It Happen. We may be the oldest couple presenting, and I don't know, we may have more grandkids than most people presenting. Here's a little picture here to show you. This is our family today. Janet and I, we have 4 kids, all married and own their own houses and homeschooling their kids, and we have 18 grandchildren. This is what you get to look forward to anyway. So we wanted to just share some experience and stories and the things that we considered most important in bringing about a successful family under the lordship of Jesus Christ in the heart of his church. And Janet, you wanted to, let's start with our mission statement.
Good idea.
I was young. I'll show you another picture here for the fun of it so you can see. Here is us when we got started. I was 17 when I met Janet. She was 19. And we fell in love and got married.
Actually, I was 15 when we met, not
That's
19.
Right. I was 17. You were 15. And when we got married, you were 19.
That's right.
And I was 21. And we were evangelical Protestants at the time. We didn't convert until 18 years into our marriage, which was one of the best things we ever did, by the way. But
Well, let me add that when I was 15 and Steve was 17, he gave his life to the Lord, and I did the same separately. We were both committed disciples of Jesus Christ, and we had planned individually to live our lives for the Lord for the rest of our days. And so that was kind of the foundation of who we were, even as teenagers.
And that's how we met, too, actually, because somebody introduced us because we were both these new on-fire Christians. Well, when we got married, we had a mission statement that we formed together. And it's very simple, only 2 points. Number 1, we were going to prove to the world that a man and a woman could live faithfully in a monogamous relationship for the rest of our lives, putting Jesus first, and prove to the world that a man and a woman could do that, even in our kind of post-Christian culture. The second point was that we could prove to the world that you could raise good kids who also love Jesus Christ and who would carry on our tradition to the next generation, both of which has happened, by the way, by the grace of God. So that was our mission statement. We started out happily married, very young, and ready to prove to the world that we could live together for the rest of our life, loving each other, faithful to each other, and raise kids that would reflect that and do the same. And praise God, we've had good success. We viewed our marriage right from the beginning as a work of art, a great masterpiece that someday we wanted that masterpiece to be hanging in the halls of heaven to give glory to God. We wanted God to look down at our masterpiece that we were painting and say, yes, that's the way I wanted it to be. That's what I had hoped for from the beginning. And so a masterpiece of art, as you're painting it, the artist, when he makes a mistake, he goes back and fixes it. But he puts his attention to that piece of art. It's not something that just happens willy-nilly. It's a work of great effort. And that's how we viewed our marriage and our family. We also viewed it as a special club. You can't just join this club called the Ray family. You have to be born into it. And we wanted our kids to realize as they grew up that they were part of a very exclusive and special club that nobody else, that they got into it because they were born into it, and don't ever do anything stupid to get kicked out of the club. So our kids always had that sense that they were part of a great masterpiece being prepared for the halls of heaven, and they were part of a great club that they always wanted to be good members of. So that's kind of how we got started and what we viewed. Janet had a bunch of letter C's.
For me, the keys that I saw to a good marriage started with our first C, commitment. Steve and I were both committed Christians, committed to the Lord, committed disciples of Jesus Christ, committed to each other, and now committed to the church. And that is the bedrock foundation. Without a commitment for the rest of your life, marriage is not going to work. So the first C is commitment. We are committed to this whole end goal of getting to heaven as believers and disciples of Jesus.
And getting all our kids there too, and as many other people we can drag along with us. And along with that commitment, to another one of the C's that we have is choices. Because commitment is a choice. It's not a feeling. You don't wake up every day feeling wonderful about this. Some days it's rough. You may be sick. It's bad days at work, whatever. But it's a commitment, and that commitment is made up of daily choices that you make. You make a choice to love my wife. She makes a choice to love me. When you first get started, it's all infatuation. Oh, we're just thinking. But, as you get going and kids come along and everything else, that some of that fades away, but there's still the commitment. I love to tell her that even if she was in a car accident, spent the rest of her life paralyzed from her neck down in a wheelchair, I wouldn't love her any less than I do, and I would take care of her every day of her life. That's commitment. You got to be, and it's nice to have two people that are committed to each other. It's a sense of security, and it's a wonderment, a great feeling. And so commitment and choice. What was your next one?
Well, Steve's family, both of us were raised in wonderful families. We had good examples. Both of our parents had wonderful marriages. Steve's mom and dad were married 73 years before his dad died. And my dad and mom were married how many years? Almost 60 years before my dad died. So we had wonderful examples of family life. But Steve's mom, her mom and dad were divorced in the 20s when she was 3 years old. So even though she had a bad example, was raised with a bad example, she made a choice. Even before she was a Christian, she made a choice that she did not want to have her children raised in a family like that. So she made the choice to be committed in a Christian sense without even knowing what she was doing. So choices have consequences. And Steve was raised in a wonderful family because of his mom's choice.
Which also, we should make a point that not all families, people are lucky enough, blessed enough to have the kind of upbringing, because there is no school of marriage. Where do you go to get a degree in marriage? You have to get a degree to be a doctor, even to be a barber these days. But people just get married without having a clue what they're doing sometimes. There's no school for that, and we were lucky to have, our school was our family. I got a PhD in family life by watching my mom and dad and living in their life. But my mom shows that even if you come from a dysfunctional family, even if you've had a very painful childhood, she went to 13 different grade schools in the 20s and 30s, you can still say, I'm not going to let that affect my life. I'm going to protect my kids from living that way. And that's what my mom very heroically did, which is then rolls down. It's like ripples in a pond. When a mother and a father do something for their family good, it's like ripples in their kid's life, and those ripples go all the way to the shore of eternity. So the next one was communication.
Communication. Steve and I talk about everything. We made a commitment to talk about everything, every little detail in our lives, every decision that we had to make. We talked about everything. And then as a result of that, we had to compromise, because a lot of times Steve and I had different ideas. So we had to compromise and work things out so that we had a united front, a united commitment, a united goal to do whatever the topic was.
Commitment and communication, very important, I agree. And we always wanted to have a united front with our children too, so they could see mom and dad were one. If there was a disagreement or understanding, we'd step into the bedroom, we'd talk it out, we'd come to a compromise, and we'd announce to the kids what our united front was the next morning. But that's the way it always had to be. The kids always knew they couldn't come and ask me something, I'd say no, so then they'd slip around and try to get mom, ask her. Mom would say, did you talk to dad about this yet? What'd dad say? Dad said no. Then I say no too. That's this communication about everything. And men, this is also about sexuality too. Men have things going on in their heads sometimes that women don't realize and know about. Men, your wife is your first line of defense. In the world, it's always trying to tempt us and lure us through pornography and everything else. So wife is your first line of defense, along with the Lord and the church. And we should be open and honest with our wives. I remember when on our 25th wedding anniversary, we spent the whole weekend just talking about these issues, because I wanted my wife, even after that many years, to continue to understand what men are like. We are visual, so on, and women are more romance, and we need to always work together. And the woman has to share her needs and her sense of feelings and so on with their husband, and the husband has to be honest with his wife, and if they understand each other, they can work together. This, even in the sexual areas and romance and so on, this is very much a matter of communication and compromise and understanding each other. Now, we already discussed choices. The fifth C that we have is a little different. It's the commitment to be countercultural. In America today, it's all about men being perceived as stupid. The feminist culture that's swirling around us now, kind of a secular, almost atheistic view of life. The idea that we as a family were countercultural. We were a rebel family in a way. That's how I viewed it. We were a rebel warrior family. We were not going to compromise with the world. We were going to show our kids that it was okay to be a rebel in a secular culture, that we were going to stand for what was right and rebel against the culture of death and all of the ideas in America that we're supposed to accept and just swallow without even thinking about it. We wanted to be countercultural, to raise our kids to be real Christians and Catholics in a non-Christian world anymore. And you know, it was fun because kids have the sense they want to be different. And I remember when our son wanted to get earrings and tattoos and he was 16 and we said, no, not in our family. He said, why, Dad? And I said, because, I said, why do you want to do it? Because everybody's doing it, Dad. I said, so you want to just be a conformist and do what everybody else? Why don't you be a non-conformist? Why don't you stand out and be an individual, son? If you really want to be noticed and be authentically different than everybody else, be an authentic Catholic. You'll really stand out. And the kid took us up on it. And now he's got 8 kids of his own, and they're a very warrior Catholic family. And all of our kids are actually, but it has to do with how you raise them. It really does.
Another way to be countercultural, is to have a family. Because in this day and age, having 1 or 2 children is the ideal. That's what the culture is telling you. To have 3, that's an acceptable mistake. Well, even though I almost died having our 3rd child and I became a high-risk pregnancy, I wanted to be countercultural and give my life to the Lord and have the crazy 4th child, even though it could endanger my life, because I wanted to be countercultural and prove to the world that family and having children is a good thing.
So commitment, communication, compromise, choices, and countercultural. And you said that all results in
companionship. The fruit of that is companionship with a depth that you cannot know until 20, 25, 35, 45 years of marriage. There is a oneness and a unity that grows from this that's amazing.
There's a oneness, a unity. We've been married 43 years, almost 44. And it's the most wonderful relationship and foundation and life that I could ever imagine.
We're best friends. We love doing everything together. We can't imagine doing anything apart.
But this all took work. It doesn't just happen. You have to set your anger aside, your anxiety aside, your own wishes aside to compromise, communicate, and do all of these things together. And then the result is I show people the picture of our family where all of us are in love with one another, and these kids are our best friends, and we're their best friends. And that's the end result. That's the end result of putting Jesus Christ first and having the kind of mission statement we had. And it's never too late to get started. There's always a day you can say, you know what? This is a new day. We're going to start over again. We screwed up. We made mistakes, but we're going to start over again. And you have no idea how many mornings we woke up and had that thought, well, we're starting all over again today. But it works. But you have to work at it. It is an effort. It is not something that just falls into place.
The goal is heaven. The goal is to be saints. And the family is a holiness factory. We are helping each other to become saints and to love the Lord more. And the goal, that's our end goal.
We always told our kids that the family is a factory of holiness. We are making saints, all of us, not just kids, but all of us. It's a factory to make saints and holiness. And so that's how we view it. Now, we also came up with 4 minefields or mountains you have to climb. We've read many times that there are 3 big issues that cause divorces and cause problems in marriages: kids, money, and sex. And I think there's a number 4, the great demand on our time, the lack of time together. So we want to just comment just quickly on those. Kids, we're madly in love. We've just gotten married. It's all the world's ahead of us. Going out to eat and having nice wine in restaurants, going on hikes together, going to bed whenever we want to. And all of a sudden, that first little baby, Cindy, popped up. And she came into our life, and it changes everything. Anybody that has a kid knows that first baby born changes everything. the husband can get very jealous because now he doesn't have exclusive access to his wife anymore. She's now busy taking care of this other little person. And wives can get so busy with the baby and fall in love with the baby, they forget about their husband. And all of a sudden, there's a lot of different problems. And then when more kids come along, discipline becomes an issue. And kids being rebellious and yelling and not obeying mom and all these problems and getting everyone together at the dinner table. And it causes stress and the temperature rises and everybody gets angry. But we have to deal with the issue of kids in the family. First of all, I let our kids know that my relationship with my wife was priority in the family. They used to say when they got older, you love mom more than you do us. And I said, you're darn right I do. Your mom and I were married in a team long before you ever came around. And we're going to still be sitting here loving each other long after you're gone. And we're not going to let you come into this family and disrupt that. You're going to have to fit in with our family and cooperate with us because there's no way in the world that I as a dad are going to let you disrupt the relationship I have with my girlfriend. And the kids respected that. And they also knew that, just so you'll know, we always had the idea that the number one thing that a father can do for his children is to love their mother. And by loving her, I also demanded respect from her. Not only did they see that respect from mom from me, but they had learned that they also had to have that kind of respect for mom. They were never allowed to say no to her or to defy her or to raise their voice against her. If they ever did, they had me to deal with, and I was very consistent about that. Fathers, this is your job. And guess what the result is? Her 4 kids and all the spouses, they adore her. They still treat her like the princess or the queen. But that has to be instilled in kids because there's times when they get in teenage years where that's not the natural response. But fathers need to be the head of their homes. Rise up to the occasion, dads. Defend your wife. Make sure the kids know that this is part of a family. They're lucky to be part of it. And they have a certain conduct and mannerism that they have to have in the family. So kids can be a problem, but they can also be the great joy of a family. And in ours it was. We homeschooled and we got to be best friends with our kids. And they knew they had to be disciplined. I disciplined them. There was no way they were going to get away with things. We had rules, just a simple way of doing this. How are we going to discipline and raise up the kids? Well, we had on the refrigerator a list with 2 columns, remember? Mm-hmm. You explained them.
Well, we had those things that were defiance, disobedience, and those things that were irresponsibility. So the defiance, disobedience, the mortal sins, you could say, the lying, the stealing, the talking, the rebellion. Those were treated differently than you forgot to make your bed, you forgot to clean up the house, you forgot to put your toys away.
So we had these categories and we had listed basic examples of each one of those violations under the defiance and the kind of the mortal sins of being a child and also the irresponsibility in others. And we had different forms of discipline. So the kids always knew what their boundaries were. They knew what the rules were. We believed in corporal punishment. Now, a lot of people today don't. My parents did, and it didn't hurt me at all. And we had corporal punishment only rarely for really defiant, bad issues. But everything else was more of creative discipline. Like I remember our son and one daughter always were arguing, so we put 2 chairs in the middle of the living room. And we said, anytime that you guys get into a fight, you're going to be sitting in those chairs for 20 minutes facing each other with your knees touching. So anytime they got into an argument or fight, Janet, even if I wasn't home, would go get 2 chairs, put them in the middle of the living room. The kids would see that and they'd each run in different directions and the fight was over instantly. But we did creative things. You can make creative ways to raise a family where the kids are wonderful things to have in the home, not disasters. Now, the second one was money. And oftentimes, money becomes a huge issue, especially when there's a lack thereof. Well, in our family, I worked and she stayed home and taught the kids. So we had to respect each other in our use of money and be careful and frugal. We didn't have 2 checking accounts and 2 bank accounts. Everything is shared. We are one. Money was not something that I used against her or she used against me. And we always compromised on the money. We always went over our money together. She actually handled the money. And I earned it, and she handled it and did the banking. But anybody, whatever form you have in there, but it's a matter of being careful. Do not get into debt. That is the most important thing. Stay out of debt. There's nothing that can cause more friction in the house than credit card debts and so on. And even with our kids, we had them when they were, as soon as they could, I think it was 16, they each got a credit card and a checking account, and we encouraged them to use their credit card as much as they could to build credit, but they had to have it paid off at the end of every month, and we double checked. And we did the same. They had our example. We used credit cards, but at the end of the month they were paid off, and we never spent more than we could afford to pay off, which is a great blessing because we never had debt. And we always were liquid, and the kids learned that lesson too, and they're all practicing. In fact, by the time they were early married, in their early 20s, all of them, they went to the bank and they all bought their own houses without our help because they'd already learned how to handle money and they had good credit. So that's kids and money roughly. Sex and romance is another issue. You want to address that?
I think you already did.
Well, a little bit, yeah. We realized early on that men and women think, and different thing motivates them. I remember the first time we got married and I ceremonially undressed and she just sat there and I said, "What? What's wrong?" See, men are visual. We're very visual, sense of smell and sound and touch. But I thought my wife wasn't like that. I didn't know there was a difference when we first got married. What turns my wife on is romance and a feeling of safety.
I remember one time I complained that Steve wasn't being romantic, and he said, "What do you mean I'm not romantic? I mowed the lawn today." I said, "You don't get it, do you?"
And it's taken me time to learn.
It's taken time for both of us to learn.
And she learns what sexually in our marriage, the wife has to be willing to listen and understand her husband because us men are very different. I always said, I wish that you had testosterone pumping through your veins so that you would understand what it's like to be a man. Inside my head, you have no idea. And she said, I wish I did too so I could understand you. But at the same time, I realized as we were married, and 25 years married, we really had this long weekend conversation. We would cry together and talk together. It was just a marvelous time. And I realized, I've always had to realize more and more that romance, gentleness, a feeling of safety, and nothing I can say to her that she loves more than I have eyes only for you. I love you and I only have eyes for you. And she always says to me, make sure you win the battle for me. Make sure that you stay that way. And marriage is involved very much with sex and romance, and you have to address it. And most of the time in marriage conferences and so on, they always say that the key to a happy marriage is going to mass together and praying together. Well, of course, that's taken for granted. We have to do those. I don't want to diminish those, but I know there's going to be a lot of other couples talking about that this weekend. But the reality is that on ground level, in the bedroom, it is a huge part of a marriage, and sex is one of those things that can be a big minefield or stumbling block to cause division. The last one we wanted to mention in these four minefields, besides kids, money, sex, and romance, is time, because our current culture is so rat raced, demanding so much of us, overtime at work, kids running off to soccer games, everything, that moms and dads, husbands and wives don't have a lot of time together. We made up our mind when we were first married that no matter how busy we got, one night a week we were going to go on a date.
And it didn't have to be anything that involved money. It could be a simple walk around the block. We had a nice 4-mile walk around the block.
And if nothing else, if there was no money and there wasn't a lot of time, we would just take a long walk. I remember one time, and this is when I started learning to be more romantic, is I wrote her a poem divided into 4 parts. 4 parts, piece of paper with a poem. It was a pretty tacky poem, probably. I don't remember the words of it, but and I went out ahead of time on our walk, and every quarter mile I taped in an envelope, stuck that first part of the poem to a tree, and then second mile, same, third mile, fourth. We went out for our walk, and when we got to that tree, I said, "Oh, what's that over there?" She said, "I don't know." She went over and she pulled it off the tree and she read the poem, and she goes, "Did you write that?" I said, "Yes." She was so excited then because it said wait for part 2. Then she couldn't wait to get to the next mile, and there was the next part of the poem. And I was learning to be romantic. But we also made a date. We made time for each other. And that paid off all week. We couldn't wait till next week to go on another date. So moms and dads, husbands and wives, lovers, keep the love there, keep the romance and the fun there, and make time for each other no matter how busy it is. There's nothing more you can do for your kids than to get away from them once in a while for time together, because as this relationship is strong, then the whole family is going to be strong. So at least once a week, take a date. Go to McDonald's if you only have $10. Go on a walk. And later on, when you get a little more money and you advance a little more, now I take her out to nicer places for our dates and do other things. But that's important. So kids, money, sex, and time. Now, family life. We just had a few points here I want to talk about. In our situation, we've always put Jesus Christ first. Our kids know that that's the conversation around the table. Kids love what their parents will love. What kind of an example do we set for our kids? This is where we talk about going to Mass every Sunday or more if you can. We had a monthly, we would all go to confession together. And we would say, this is important. Everybody pack up. Saturday afternoon, once a month, we head to confession. And I wanted our kids to get that to be a routine, like a rhythm, a tradition in their life. And we would go, and I'd always be the first one in, because I'd tell my kids, I'm the chief sinner among all of us. And I wanted to be a good example. I'd go in and confess my sins and say, okay, now it's all your turns. Now guess what our families do? They go to confession once a month together. And I remember our grandson, Josh, when he first went, he was so proud that he went to confession. And a while later, he said, Papa, I've been to confession 37 times now. But this doesn't just happen if you don't have the family tradition of the faith. We used to invite Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons to come over, and the kids would love listening to me, talking to them from the Bible and explaining. This is a whole life. What you love, your kids will love. And if you love Jesus Christ and his church and you put that first, and that's what you talk about, and that's what you discuss, and you pray together, pray the rosary together, do these things, that's what your kids are going to grow up loving too. So, second of all, and then I'll let my Janet do the next part, is I think the most important thing too, and I've already mentioned it, is fathers, the most important thing you can do for your kids is love their mother, protect their mother, show by example how special she is and how much you love her, and the kids will grow up doing the same thing. And father and mother, as their example of loving each other, gives the kids then a good example for when they get married someday. Discipline. We talked about it a little bit already.
We talked about that.
Time, we talked about. Example. Another thing we did is we always treated each other as equals, completely as equals. I'm the father, I'm the husband. I've always viewed myself as the head of the home. Janet said when we got married, I want a strong husband. I want somebody who's the head of the home. I want somebody to discipline the children and to earn the money and to be a loving, strong husband.
But at the same time, we're equals before God. So we both have responsibility to treat each other as equals.
And I know who
God.
the heart of the family is. She's the heart of the family. And we want it to be always equals. Like Paul said, there's neither male nor female, slave nor free. In the family, we're equal. And we treated our children as equals as well. We didn't talk down to them. Well, didn't you? We always talked to them as they were one of us. We didn't say, oh, well, we can't talk. We don't want to talk when the kids are new. We always included them in the conversations. I talked to my kids about sex from 6 or 7 years old. We don't want the schools doing that. That's my job. That's Janet's job. And our kids felt very comfortable talking to us about sex and love and all these things because we were open to communicate and treat them as equals as well. And the equality among treating them that way has a great payoff because then they feel important, they feel mature, and they don't feel like second-class citizens.
I would add that we like a peaceful house. We want our house to be calm and joyful. And one of the goals to get there is to no grouchies allowed. People are not allowed to be grouchy in our house and in our family. You can't have the excuse, oh, well, I can be grouchy until I have my first cup of coffee in the morning. That's an excuse. There is no reason to be grouchy ever.
And we never let our kids be bored either. If they said they were bored, we had a whole list of things. Even when their friends came over, if the friends ever said bored, we gave them tasks.
They could fold the laundry. They could empty the dishwasher.
Yeah, and kids can't learn, never come over here. And by the way, one last thing, because we're running out of time. Get rid of the television. in your family, don't let the television be the head of the family and the center of attention. You wouldn't let naked dancing girls come into your home. Don't let them be on the television with commercials and all the garbage there. Get rid of the television. Read books together. Just watch movies. Get good classic movies together and fun things. Get rid of the television, cable, and all of that stuff. It'll ruin your life. Anyway, in summary, because we're way over time already, we just want to encourage young families. It can be done. We've shown it can be done. Through all the trials and the efforts and the stumbling and bumbling, we made it work.
And it's fun. And you make good memories.
So we're just looking back over the years and telling you how we did it and encouraging you to do the same. So anyway, we're very proud to be happy to be a part of this marriage conference. And we both say God bless you very much.
God bless you.